Welcome to Fourth and Frames, a show on the Fantasy and Frames podcast network. I'm your host, Chris Battistel, and with me, as always, except on the days when we don't show up, is Rhett Manuel and Drew Scott, and we welcome very special guest, Jorge Edwards, and we break down all of our redraft rankings, QBs, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends on this episode of Fourth and Frames. Let's get it popping.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Welcome to the show, everybody. We appreciate each and every one of you. While you're here, like the stream, subscribe to the channel, rate and review the podcast wherever you consume the Fourth and Frames podcast. Your help is greatly appreciated, and we appreciate each and every one of you that tune in every week. Drop a question in the chat, and we will answer it live on the air. Like I said at the top of the show, we have a very special guest with us today, Jorge Edwards, the boss man over here at Fantasy and Frames. Jorge, welcome back to the show. I think you're the clubhouse leader in guest appearances on Fourth and Frames, so congratulations.
Well, you mean I'm rivaling Jason Snyder and Keith Fleming as the...
Yeah. Yep.
Wow, that's
Keith will be the one. Keith is going to take that personal.
I hope he doesn't talk crap to me tomorrow on Fantasy Football Weekly. I'm looking forward to that. No, guys, thank you very much. You being able to come on the show and talk shop with three of the up-and-coming superstars in this industry, just all the hard work you put in front of the camera and behind the scenes, just see it every day. It's a pleasure to come in here and talk some shop with you.
Yeah, and we're glad to have you on. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the discrepancies of our early redraft rankings from all the positions across the board without kickers and team defense, because really, as important as they are to some of your redraft teams, I just don't know enough about the team defenses and kickers this early on in the season. And I'm sure we don't want to bore you talking about kickers and team defense. It's like if you tuned in to listen to us talk about soccer, it's just not going to end well or start well. Rhett, Drew, Scott Fishbowl 14 scoring has dropped maybe today. It hasn't been official yet. But have you guys dove into the scoring at all to kind of find your early edge and what positions you want to attack early?
I mean, Drew was talking to me about it before the show because I didn't see it because I was out today with my kids doing a little bit of bowling, having a good time. But I mean, apparently from what I hear, the early indications are that PPR scoring for wide receivers and running backs have dropped back down to half PPR while the tight end scoring has remained the same. So we're looking at potentially a triple tight end premium this season, which seems wild to me. So early indications for me, the early possibilities are that we might see some tight ends go in the first round and definitely get some, might see a few tight ends go in the first round, and that you're going to have to get them early, and you might be able to find some value on running backs and quarterbacks a little bit later on. So, I mean, early indication says get your tight end research done. This is a big advantage for guys like Howard Bender and Andrew Cooper, who nerd out over this stuff all day. But you know what? We'll do our best with it as well. Yeah, for me being the they might be the tight end whisperers. I think I'm the tight end grunter, so I'm working on it right now.
I like it.
I don't know if you all were listening to the Fantasy Cares broadcast this afternoon, where they just happened to drop the rules, or at least some of the rules. They were contemplating having 0.25 points per target.
Yeah. That would have been cool.
Sleeper just couldn't pull it off. That was the issue, right? So you had to change it.
And I like Scott said it with his chest. He said targets are earned, and so that should be rewarded in fantasy points. And I mean, I agree, targets are earned, and so I thought it was a cool idea. It's unfortunate the sleeper won't be able to accommodate it. But that would have been a really cool wrinkle if it could have worked. So I appreciated the idea behind it, even though it didn't come to fruition. But that was pretty cool.
Does that instantly make Deontay Johnson a wide receiver 1 in a target earned point per target format for you?
I think it was 0.25 per target. So
Yes.
so I would have moved him up a few spots for sure. Yeah, he definitely would have. He definitely would have went up a few spots if that would have stuck. But no, I mean for me, I'm picking out of the 3 hole, and so I wanted to make sure to get one of the top couple quarterbacks this year, because last year in the Scott Fishbowl I picked at the very back. I wanted to switch it up and pick out of the front this year, and so now I'm kind of just hoping that Lamar makes it to me at the 103. Honestly, that's fingers crossed. That's what I'm hoping for. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm excited to dive in. I'm excited to run a ton of mocks. Jorge, are we running a mock show tonight?
You know what? I'm all down for it if everybody else is. So we do have a show that we're going to be doing at all crazy times of the day and of the hour in the evening, called the Scott Fishbowl Fish Tank. So literally, I could be talking to Chris, Rhett, or Drew at 11 o'clock at night, and it's like, you want to do a mock show? Yep. All right, let's go do a mock show. It's just as fun as that. The sleeper link on Twitter and everywhere else that you all consume fantasy football content. And the purpose of that show is not to really teach anything, as it is just to have fun mock drafting and having a good time talking about fantasy football.
Yeah, and as soon as those mock drafts start happening in the scoring drafts, I'm gonna have to start hitting those mocks hard, because my live draft in Houston is July 6th. So I'm gonna have like a month of grinding on mocks to do, and then like straight into it. So should be fun. We'll see.
It's crazy that we talk about like the doldrums of the summer when it comes to fantasy football content, and like June was always that month that everybody's like, ugh, what do we do in June? Can you imagine where we would be right now if there wasn't Scott Fishbowl or like other charity leagues?
Don't think that wasn't by design, in my opinion.
Of course not. Yeah.
The charity leagues definitely help fill in the gaps for sure, and they represent great causes as well, which it doesn't hurt. But yeah, it definitely helps bring up what would typically be the down part of the off season for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get into it. The goal of this episode is to help you get an understanding of the difference in all 4 of our perspectives when we're constructing our early rankings. And then hopefully we can maybe sway one another on making an adjustment as we talk about each and every player. First, we are diving into the quarterback position. The first guy we're going to talk about is Joe Burrow. We all have him ranked in a different spot, but we have him ranked as a QB1. Jorge ranks him the lowest at QB10. Drew, QB8. I got him at QB9. And then Rhett ranks him at QB7. Jorge, you have him ranked the lowest between us. Is that you ranking him at his ceiling, or is that ranking him at his floor?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I want to say right now that is probably a floor play, just because we talk about a lot of these quarterbacks who are coming back from injury. And let me just single out 2 in particular who just happened to be who suffered the same injury last year: Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers, dealing with their Achilles injury. An Achilles injury is not like something you just snap back from, if pardon the pun, but you come back from a few months after you have that injury. It's a potentially a year-long injury. And these guys, you're seeing the highlight reels, you're seeing the clips, you're seeing the reports out of the various camps and OTAs of the connection that they're having with the receivers. We haven't seen that from Joe Burrow yet, and so when you look at where he's currently going, ADP on Fantasy Pros, quarterback 7, like if you're, which first of all, kudos to you if you're doing this already, but if you're doing your redraft drafts now, all right, in June, and you have an uncertainty in terms of a health situation with Joe Burrow, would you rather wait out on a Joe Burrow, or would you rather get a Jordan Love who finished in points per game 6th, a Kyler Murray who finished 9th, Dak, Kirk Cousins, Trevor Lawrence, Brock Purdy, all of which fall down the list, descending from 7, where Joe Burrow's ADP is at? I'd just rather take the more sure thing with the high production. Now, when I say sure thing, look, it's Joe Burrow is a sure thing when he's healthy and his weapons are on the field. You go back to 2021, was the QB4 in points per game. 2022 was the 7th. last year, 25, but we obviously know that he was dealing with an injury in training camp. I believe it was like a calf injury before he came into the season. Then he kind of worked through that, and then all of a sudden, things just never really clicked for the Cincinnati Bengals, and then he got injured in the Baltimore game. But when he's on, he's on. And again, like I'm glad that you prefaced this earlier. These are early redraft rankings. So right now, I feel like I'd rather go with a more safe option. But that could definitely change come August, where it's like, oh my God, he is just him and Burton are making all these great plays on the field, and T. Higgins is happy again, and everything is rain. Then I can see him moving up. But for right now, that's where I have him at 10.
Yeah, and the interesting thing with Burrow is you're not really getting the injury discount. Like, even though he's coming back from an injury right now in best ball drafts, he's still going as the quarterback 7. He's one spot ahead of Dak Prescott, and that's Dak coming off of a season where I think he was the quarterback 3 last year, if memory serves me correct. And so you've got Dak coming off a year that successful, Burrow coming back from injury, Burrow still going ahead of him, and so you're not really getting much of a discount there. He's going as the quarterback 7. I've got him as the quarterback 8. But honestly, I'm going to end up not having any Joe Burrow this year if things stay the way they are, just simply because, he's in a tier for me. He's in technically my tier 3 of quarterbacks, which I basically call the elite pocket passers, not named Patrick Mahomes, where he's sandwiched right in between CJ Stroud and Dak Prescott. He's right in the middle of those two guys for me. And so, like, I always do my rankings assuming that it's 4 points per passing touchdown. If you make it 6 points per passing touchdown, which what some leagues are, that does change things a little bit. But in 4 points per passing touchdown, I prefer to take a shot on a guy like Anthony Richardson's going a few spots higher. It would, like, unrelated to Joe Burrow, but the reason that I won't have much Joe Burrow is the fact that Kyler Murray, he feels like the clear best value at quarterback in drafts right now. He's, according to Best Ball ADP, he's going off the board as a quarterback 9 behind Burrow, behind Stroud, behind Dak. I've got him up at quarterback 6 ahead of all those guys. And so, like, you could take Burrow, or you can wait around and you can take Kyler instead. And so that's just with the way things are shaking out at the position right now, even though I love Joe Burrow, the player. And I think, the 2 years he's been healthy, he was in 6 point per passing touchdown leagues talking about how different it can make things. He was the quarterback 4 and the quarterback 7 the last 2 years that he was healthy. And so the upside is there. But if you're banking on everybody playing 17 games and you play in 4 points per passing touchdown leagues, I would rather get a guy like Kyler that has the rushing upside and you can wait to get him. So that's why for me, I'm just probably not going to have too much of Burrow this year.
And I agree with all that. I have Burrow as my quarterback 7 because of the fact that, yes, when he's at his best, he is going to be one of the elite passing quarterbacks in the game. And we mentioned the fact Jorge said, well, we don't see him building rapport like Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers. Well, Joe Burrow doesn't need to do that because, number one, he's been with Zach Taylor and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins for, 4 years now? So he has a
Chase even longer.
Yeah, Chase even longer. So there's an intense familiarity going on with all of those guys to begin with. And even though Brian Callahan left to coach the Tennessee Titans, I firmly believe that a lot of the passing concepts were Zach Taylor's anyway. So while you see all these videos of Kirk Cousins throwing the ball to Drake London a little bit wide, go ahead.
Yeah, so my bringing that up was not the fact that he needs to build rapport. It's that you're seeing him play already. You're seeing him on the field playing.
Like you're at least seeing clips of him out there putting in work.
Versus Joe Burrow, who's still yet to return from injury, and we don't know when that exactly is supposed to happen.
But the good news is that we've at least know that Joe Burrow is alive because we've seen pictures of him with an Anakin Skywalker haircut. So, I mean, good news for us is that we know Joe Burrow is alive, and he will definitely, probably, most likely be at training camp. So,
and he looks good, and that's the first step to look good, feel good, play good. He's got the look good part down, so he's on the right track as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's an interesting position to be in with Joe Burrow when you're ranking him because of the lack of talent and depth. And Drew, I know you're a big proponent for Zach Moss this season, but the lack of production that might come out of that backfield might put Joe Burrow up a tier because they might ask him to just do more in that situation. We could see multiple back-to-back games where he's throwing 2 to 3 touchdowns, right? So that's going to pick up his finish at least, or should pole vault his rankings at least a little bit. I mean, we all got him 8, 7, 9, and 10. So I feel like the quarterbacks that we have in that range, we could all be flipping them around come August time when we finalize our draft rankings.
Yeah, Burrow's really similar to Dak, where like the options that they have in the backfield are underwhelming to say the least. And so why not just let your elite quarterback throw the ball a ton? Like like you could just pass. You could run through the air. Just let Burrow dump it off a few times as opposed to handing the ball to Zach Moss. Like why not? So yeah, I could see both of those guys getting some additional volume just off the fact that they don't really have a guy that you can trust in the backfield, or maybe the coaching staff really does love Zach Moss, or maybe the Cowboys coaching staff really does love having Zeke back and Rico Dowdle. I don't know, but to me, I'm putting the ball in Dak and Burrow's hands if it's up to me, but I'm not an offensive coordinator. So
you have to go back when you get a chance, Drew, and listen to Dynasty 365. We just wrapped up with Jim Coventry. Let's just say, not the biggest Zach Moss fan, and I gave you a shout out too. I was like, "Hey, don't do my Drew dirty like that." But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I like him in redraft just from what we saw last year in terms of the success that he saw out of the shotgun with Indianapolis last year whenever he was in the starting role, and then how often Cincinnati runs out of shotgun. And I do think that if I'm wrong about how the backfield plays out, then it won't matter. But I think that Zach Moss is going to get a lot of the early down work and a lot of the inside the 5 carries. And if I'm rostering a running back in Cincinnati, that's the role that I want to target. I don't want to target the pass catching running back. They already have enough pass catchers as it is. Now, if Chase Brown ends up getting more of that early down work than I anticipate, then that Zach Moss take goes up in flames. But they didn't waste much time to go get Zach Moss. And so I think they have a plan for him. I don't think he's a great running back by any means. Like in terms of his actual talent, I think he's a bad running back, but that does not matter if he's getting the work and he's in a good offense, And so I don't expect him to be a back in RB1 like Joe Mixon was, but I think you could do much worse as like an RB3 on your team, as a guy that could possibly get goal line carries for an offense as good as the Bengals. That they're going to spend a lot of time in the in the red zone and inside the 10, inside the 5. So. I guess it just really depends on how much you believe in Chase Brown. And like I'm not a huge Chase Brown guy. I'm not a huge Zach Moss guy either, but I don't think either one is really going to take off necessarily.
All right, let's get to our next quarterback on the docket. I'm going to put you two, Rhett and Drew, against, of course, I pick the boss as my tag team partner. So debate wisely, boys. We're talking Jaden Daniels, rookie quarterback coming in for the Washington Commanders. Drew's got him at 11. Rhett's got him at 14. Jorge and myself got him on the back end of the QB2 range. I got him at 18, and Jorge ranks him at 21. So Rhett and Drew, I got to hear why you guys have Jaden Daniels, a rookie QB who's only possesses a 1-year breakout, to be a back-end QB1.
Drew, you want to eviscerate these cats, or should I do it?
Go ahead. I'll pick up where you leave off.
All right. So the argument is very simple. First off, Jorge, let me say this: quarterback 21 for your own team is a deplorable ranking. And
He knows.
You should be ashamed of yourself. You should have that irrational confidence that J.R. Smith from 35 feet. That's a basketball reference for all you football people. But anyway.
Where do you have your quarterback? Where do you have Derek Carr ranked in your rankings?
Oh, no, he's objectively terrible, though, so that's fine. But anyway, the Jaden Daniels argument comes down to a couple of things. First off, and I think we all know this in fantasy football, rushing upside matters. Yep. We can all agree on that, correct?
Yep.
Sure.
So our boy, friend of the podcast, friend of the show, Derek Brown on Fantasy Pros, has pointed out perfectly for us. Yes, we're not all the biggest fans of Cliff Kingsbury's offense, but that being said, the Cliff Kingsbury offense fits Jaden Daniels' skill set like a glove. What is the Cliff Kingsbury offense? Zone read stuff with the quarterback, a lot of play action, a lot of deep ball attempts. Where are the 3 areas that Jaden Daniels can most likely thrive? Zone read stuff, off of the play action, He absolutely killed teams in college football on deep balls last year. So for me, quarterback to scheme fits very well. Fantasy Pros projections have him at 3,500 passing yards, which feels high for me. 550 rushing yards and 26 total touchdowns.
The rushing yards is too low.
Yeah, I feel like the rushing yards are too low and the passing yards are too high.
Might be a little high, yeah.
So let's go ahead and let's run that back. If we're looking at more like 2,800 or 3,000 passing yards, and instead replacing that 550 rushing with 800, which feels like it's very possible, with 20 passing touchdowns and another 7 to 9 rushing, you're actually ending up with more fantasy points on the back end because of the rushing upside. And that's where the quarterback one upside situation happens.
Yep. No, I'm in lockstep with you on that. I mean, I've got him as a back end QB1, and I already mentioned the difference between 4-point versus 6-point passing touchdown leagues. If it was 6-point, he'd probably be a little bit lower than what he is in 4-point. But just for full transparency, I've got Daniels technically in my quarterback 11, but he's in a tier that's 8 players deep between my quarterback 10 and quarterback 17. So Brock Purdy is the only player in the tier that's ahead of him, and then you got several guys behind him. Whenever I look at the guys that are behind Jaden Daniels, for me, you've got Jordan Love, who doesn't really run, and I think between adding Josh Jacobs and just natural regression, I think his passing touchdown rate is going to come down this year compared to last year. It doesn't feel good to rank Herbert lower than Daniels. That one really doesn't feel good just because of how good of a real NFL quarterback that Herbert is. But I do think there's at least some truth to being worried about what the coaching staff, what their plans are for the offense and what might come of that. And then you have guys that don't really have the rushing upside like Lawrence and Tua and Goff, where like with all those guys in the same tier, I just prefer to take a shot on the guy that could break fantasy if he runs the ball the way that we think he's capable of. And it's not like he's got no weapons to throw to. Like Terry McLaurin is a really good receiver. We'll see, the jury's still out on Jahan Dotson. We'll see what comes of that. But, Chris, I know that you are a pretty big fan of the tight end that they took in the NFL draft as well. And Ben Sinnott, and we'll see if Cliff Kingsbury is as stubborn with Zach Ertz in Washington as he was in Arizona. But I think he has weapons to make it happen in the passing game. I think he has the legs to make it happen in the running game. And whenever you're in a one quarterback league and you only have to draft one quarterback, this is just the type of guy that I would want to take the risk on later in drafts. Like, why? Even if you look at like Brock Purdy is the guy that I have one spot ahead of Goff, ahead of Jaden Daniels. But why would I want to draft Brock Purdy at quarterback 11 whenever I could draft, Jared Goff at quarterback 14 or Trevor Lawrence at quarterback 15, Tua at quarterback 16? They all feel like the same guy to me. And Jaden Daniels just brings something different to the table that those guys don't. And so in a one quarterback league, if I am waiting on quarterback, that's the type of guy I prefer to take a shot on. And even if you want to take, like, you can draft Jaden Daniels and Jared Goff with back-to-back picks. And then, if Daniels does come out the gate and you can tell that he just wasn't, hey, you're not that guy, pal, then you have a safe option that you can go back to. But it's just, one quarterback leagues, things change a lot in Superflex, right? The quarterback position becomes much more important. You can't afford to take as many risks. In one quarterback league, man, if you're waiting on quarterback, just take the risk and shoot for the moon. And if it doesn't work out, then you can stream, the rest of the year. So that's kind of how I look at it whenever I go through with my rankings. So for me, he's going to be a quarterback 1. Right now, he's going off the board at quarterback 17. I'm going to have a lot of Jaden Daniels in one quarterback leagues. I'm going to be doing a lot of waiting on quarterback if that sticks.
All right. So fair. It seems like the main reason that you guys have him as high as you do is him being propped up by his rushing upside, which is fair. Mm-hmm. Fantasy points from quarterbacks, especially in 4-point passing TD leagues, you're going to want those elite rushers. Jorge, you and I have him on the back end. You have him at QB 21, so a back end QB 2. You have a rebuttal for what Rhett and Drew put on the table there?
I guess the first part would be, so they're just going to ignore the running back position. They're just going to not hand the ball. Basically, they're going to give Jaden Daniels, do everything. Hike the ball to yourself, run the ball, do a Mr. Perfect, throw the ball in the air.
I love that.
In zone. Like, hey, we don't need anybody else on the team, man. Just do everything, and you're going to get all the fantasy points. And last I checked, so are other people on defense against the teams that they'll be facing? Are they just slow? Can they not apply pressure to the quarterback? I'd love to see Jaden Daniels' efficiency metrics when under pressure. I don't think they're actually were the highest at LSU last year. And they look at the pass rushers that are in the division, at least, are pretty good. And last I checked, that the offensive line and the offensive tackle situation for the Washington Commanders is not set in stone, which is something as a Commanders fan that still grinds my gears that we don't have a committed left tackle yet. So I understand the cheat code in the rushing yards, but you say, Drew, that they have a lot of good weapons in the passing game. I can only name you one for sure that they do, and I can guess that they do with the other ones. One I know for sure that they have is in Terry McLaurin. I don't know whether you have that in Jahan Dotson. I don't know if you have that, if the corpse of Zach Ertz can provide more fantasy relevance. Ben Sinnott.
Yeah.
Ben Sinnott. First of all, Chris, your profile on Ben Sinnott, which you can find on our YouTube page and over at fantasyframes.com, was fantastic. But is he going to get on the field enough to actually capitalize on some of the efficiency metrics and the opportunities that he'll have, the snaps, so to speak? And not to mention, this town is still very weary of 2012. We're very weary of somebody by the name of Haloti Ngata taking out RG3 on one of these design runs. And the last thing that this organization wants to go through again is having a mobile quarterback put himself in a position to get hurt. They're going to want to keep him more in the pocket. So you have a quarterback that's going to be more in the pocket and not be utilized necessarily as a running factor every single time with a bad offensive line versus good pass rushing defenses that they're going to be facing. And not to mention, I am a huge believer in Brian Robinson this year. I think he will finish as an RB2. I do like the fact that they brought in Anthony Lynn, who has a good track record of working with running backs over the course of his career. So I get it. I get what you're saying. And I could even be talked into saying maybe 21 is a little bit too conservative, but at the end of the day, I need to see it first before I start getting the anointing oil, as Bill Parcells used to say back in the day.
Number one, if you're going to wait to see it, then you're already going to be too late. So at that point, you've missed the ball. But then I don't think this coaching staff gives a damn about what happened to RG3 over a decade ago. Like you can't take a guy, Jaden Daniels, number 2 overall, and be like, all right, we're going to turn him into a pocket passer, even though that's not his biggest strength, just because RG3, his injury got hurt from scrambling over a decade ago. Like I just don't see that as a realistic possibility. You might have ties to Washington. They don't give a shit about what happened to the Commanders a decade ago at all. And if you're taking Jaden Daniels at quarterback at number 2 overall, and you're like, all right, we're going to turn him into a pocket passer, that's a red flag right off the rip for me anyway. Like if there was some way that I could know that was the case, I would be lower on Daniels, because that's just a complete misuse of his talents. And so I hope that's not the case. But
look, they're not using him as a fantasy quarterback. They're using him as an NFL quarterback. Like he's not.
Yeah, and if you want to have the most success with Jaden Daniels, you use his mobility to your advantage. Like it's a plus for the offense to be able to have that unpredictability and be able to, like, the defense has to account for that. Like, all right, we can't just rush this guy because he can either just scramble and beat the blitz, or he could hit these guys on quick slants, things like that. Like, his rushing ability is a huge plus for the offense and something that they should be baking into their game plan. And so I would just be shocked if that wasn't the case.
I agree to it. I agree to a degree. I agree to a degree. That's funny. But look, this team needs to be more balanced. They can't put this quarterback in harm's way. So I don't know you're going to see this all-out explosiveness that we're expecting year 1 out of him. I think they're going to kind of take it easy on him and force him not to do too much and kind of let the pieces around him, whichever they are, do some of their magic, specifically in the running game.
I agree. I think that they should be more balanced, and I do like Brian Robinson's value in drafts. But Rhett, I know you had a point that you wanted to get to here.
Yeah, even so, if we're going to talk about giving Jaden Daniels safety nets, Jorge, if memory serves me correctly, didn't the Washington Commanders sign a running back this offseason that's 2 years removed from a 100-catch season and 1 year removed from a 50-catch season where he was injured last season in Austin Eckler?
And on the decline, yeah. What about him?
Okay, all I'm saying is this. If you need a safety net, they signed one. I don't care that he's on the decline. James White was on the decline for years, and he still ended up being a valuable safety net
How
for
dare
Tom
you?
Brady.
James White was never on a decline. James White was the perfect PPR receiving option for the New England Patriots.
Oh, and it's as if Austin
Should've been the
Eckler is
Super
not the
Bowl
perfect
MVP.
PPR.
He should have been the Super Bowl MVP.
option.
All right. So for Jaden Daniels, at least I'll make this short and sweet so we can pivot to the next group of players. It's just a report came out today that the Washington Commanders are going to want to run a very fast-paced offense, and having a quarterback who struggled with processing coverages and reading the field and going through his progressions as a whole at the college level, coming up to the NFL, learning a new scheme, and then being thrust into a position where you got to play at such a fast pace. I just don't think it's going to bode well for Jaden Daniels. Also, 800 yards, I believe, is a stretch. Over the past 4 seasons, only 4 quarterbacks in 16 games, because in fantasy football, we're talking 16 games, have broken the 800-yard mark. In 2021, we didn't have one quarterback break 800 yards rushing through that span. And for those quarterbacks to finish at the top end of their position, they were propped up by decent passing yards outside of Lamar Jackson's, I believe, 2020 season, where he put up 1,000 rushing yards and had a limited passing profile, but finished ultimately as the quarterback 10 that year in fantasy points scored. So for Jaden Daniels, for me, to be able to finish as a top end QB1, he's going to have a season like Lamar Jackson's 2020. And personally, I don't see him as the same type of player as Lamar Jackson, at least. I mean, he's good running the ball. To me, Lamar Jackson's just on a different level. And I believe Lamar Jackson's a better passer. Maybe not a better deep ball passer, but a better passer.
A more complete passer.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah, I think
for me,
fair.
for Jaden Daniels to have a season like that, a lot of good things are going to have to happen for him. And I'm just not a believer in the coaching staff.
That's the beautiful thing about all this, is the way that we can interpret things differently, though, because whenever I saw that they were going to be wanting to play fast, I looked at it as a good thing. Like, hey, if you have a guy that in college, struggled with reading defenses and things like that, try to take that out of it and just quick reads. If your first read, second read isn't there,
but he's not stretching the field in at that point. If it's just dinking and dunking, where does his value come from as a passer? Right?
Every offense is going to have deep shots worked in, though.
Sure.
I mean, it's not like
he's
they're
going to
just
have the deep shots. But if the argument is deep shots and rushing, and then they take away it, let's say they take away 35% of the deep balls that he would throw when he's not in a fast-paced offense, that's going to hurt his value at the end of the day, right?
Yeah,
So,
it is. And he's one of the riskier picks at quarterback, I would say. But in one quarterback leagues with him going in quarterback 17, what risk really is there at that point?
Exactly. If you have him as your QB2 in a QB1 league, I'll take that. If you have him as your QB1 in the QB1 league, I'm going to be a little
You might want to have a backup option.
All right, so that's the QBs. We've run too long on the quarterbacks, fellas. We can quickly touch on Kirk Cousins, or we can just pivot over to the running backs. Did you guys have any hot takes on Kirk Cousins?
I like him.
I think
he's good.
Yeah. Jorge's got him at 12. I got him at 17. Rhett's got him at 18. And Drew's got him at 20. So Jorge's the only one that's got him as a QB1 right now. I mean, we're all expecting big things for the offense, especially out of the positional players for the Atlanta Falcons. So I guess for the three of us, it's the injury and how much he's going to perform coming back from the injury.
No,
yeah, that's what it is a little bit for me.
That was my biggest takeaway, honestly, was I was kind of surprised how low I was on Cousins compared to the rest of you guys, considering how high I am on the Falcons offense as a whole and how high I am on Pitts and on London and on Bijan. But it's a combination of him being a year older, dealing with the injury, not having any rushing upside, changing teams. There's a lot of factors going into it to where, like, I love what he does for uplifting the Falcons offense, but I would just rather take different shots at the position if I'm, trying to draft my QB1 a little bit later. But he's not a bad guy to pair with Jaden Daniels, just go for the upside of Daniels. And if it doesn't work out, you got Kirk Cousins sitting there who's going to probably give you a, top 15, top 16 quarterback season.
Yeah. And for him to be a QB1, which is what, Jorge said, for all the lack of rushing upside, you're probably looking at a guy who has to knock down close to 5,000 yards and probably 30, 35 touchdowns at minimum to have a quarterback one season with that sort of profile. So it's a tall ask, but if they throw the ball a lot and they end up doing, and that offense blows up like expected, there's an outside chance that there's a QB1 season ahead of him.
You look back to his familiarity with the coaching tree here. You have Zach Robinson coming over from the Rams, who was under the McVay tree. Let's not forget McVay and Kirk Cousins kind of have a history. There is familiarity with the coaching scheme. We did see when the Rams, the Rams passing attack, Matthew Stafford was always tops when healthy with the Rams in terms of passing attempts. I'm not worried about there. We have Bijan Robinson coming out saying yesterday, which, I'm going to be used like CMC. I don't care about that. That's June talk. What I care about is the fact that they are going to be planning to use him out of the backfield as a receiving option. I like that. We talk about his progression since 2021, QB 12, dropped back to QB 14, was a QB 7, I believe, last year in points per game. You mentioned it's a tall task. Well, it helps when you have, players that are up to the challenge, like the Kyle Pitts. You have a Bijan out of the backfield. I don't think it's as tall as a task as we're making it out to be.
Yeah, those playmakers are the reason why I started feeling like I might be a little too low on Cousins. I might have to move him up a few spots.
All right. That's Kirk Cousins, and that's the quarterback position. We're going to pivot to everyone's favorite hated position. It seems like the lowly old running backs. I feel like these running backs have molded into tight ends where everyone just doesn't want any of them. There's a couple elite guys, and then there's just a bunch of hogwash. We're going to talk Josh Jacobs. Jorge's got him at 21. Drew 14. I got him at 10 and Rhett at 15. Jorge, is it AJ Dillon? Is it Marshawn Lloyd that makes you hesitant with ranking Josh Jacobs, or is it the history of the Green Bay Packers and the usage of their running backs that makes you hesitant to rank Josh Jacobs up as high as us three?
I don't know who Josh Jacobs is. I got to be honest with you anymore.
The real Josh Jacobs, please stand up.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Josh Jacobs coming into last year wasn't exactly the most successful running back for fantasy purposes. Then he had a great 2022. You go back and now, 2 years ago, he had a great 2022 season where he was averaging 19.3 PPR points per game. Then last year, he dropped down to 13.9 points per game. You look at the touchdown rate, in 2021, 4.1, 2022, 3.5, 2023, 2.6. You look at his success rate versus zone, 41.9%, which had him as the RB40, which is something that the Green Bay Packers run a lot of. You look at his success versus man, 49.1%, which RB21. So, there's a decline somewhere in performance that we saw. And people are going to tell me, oh, it's the Raiders. He just crapped out on his team. Generic. He gave up, yada, yada, yada. Whatever, man. Like, do you really know that? No, then don't say it.
Zamir White did all right.
Well, he did. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's exactly the point. Like, is that indicative of Josh Jacobs, not being as good as we're thinking he is? But then again, you go over to PFF and you look at last year. He was RB 19 in yards per route run. RB going back to 2022, RB 21, 26. So he's getting more efficient in the passing game. He was one of their top 5 rated running backs. So who is Josh Jacobs? And if there was some like consistency with him being in Vegas, I would be a little bit more happy just because we saw the volume that Antonio Pierce was giving the running backs there, especially with Zamir White down the stretch. But now you go to Green Bay, you draft Marshawn Lloyd. Like, I don't think this is going to be a running back in Josh Jacobs where he's going to be the Aaron Jones of that offense. I think he has a little bit of one-dimensionality to him, and they brought in Marshawn Lloyd to kind of help out in the receiving game. A.J. Dillon, I'm not worried about. A.J. Dillon is depth, and I'm actually surprised that they brought him back, but I guess, getting cheap depth with familiarity in your offense is important. So there's a lot of unknowns there, which is why I keep dropping them down my list in terms of where I have them ranked for running backs. But still, if, even though the touchdown rate's been going down, if the success goes well, if they start adapting more of a man gap type of running scheme to accommodate his strengths there, and then you see the uptick in receiving efficiency, I could see him maybe bumping up 1 or 2 spots, but I can't really in good conscience have him much higher than I have him right now.
Yeah, and that's a great argument, though. But for me, when you're looking at the profiles between 2022, where you had that great season, and 2023, and you look at what the defense was doing in both of those years, there's a contrast of how they were attacking the Las Vegas Raiders. In 2023, which was last year, he was the RB1 in average defenders in the box at 7.2. In 2020, he was RB20, so he wasn't seeing as heavy as a defensive front when he was trying to touch the ball. Stacked front carry rate in 2023, he was RB4. In 2022, RB17. So those are the things that are going to matter. Stuffed runs, 2022, 51. Last year, 45. So he was getting stuffed at the line last year, but he was still able, or 2022, but he was still able to produce. A.J. Dillon doesn't scare me. We've seen him be put in the doghouse multiple times. I think they just kept him there because he knows the blocking schemes. He knows the scheme as a whole, and he was cheap. Marshawn Lloyd is the running back that, I'm not worried about as a whole. I think they'll utilize Marshawn Lloyd a little bit more earlier in the season, like they did last year, where they didn't really use Aaron Jones too much in the first few weeks. And then that back end of the season, when they were making a push for the playoffs, Aaron Jones was a big part of that package. And if they utilize Josh Jacobs like that, and someone else drafts him and he starts slow, go trade for Josh Jacobs, because if he's the guy that they lean on in the back half of the season, because Marshawn Lloyd doesn't have this elite pass-catching profile coming out of college. He was a great runner in the Pac-12, which doesn't necessarily have the best defenses going against the opposing offenses. But he's probably got more juice than Josh Jacobs, which worries me a little bit. But I'm not overly worried. There's a lot of consensus fade on Josh Jacobs right now because of the love and the rookie fever for Marshawn Lloyd. But I've taken my cold and flu medicine, so I have not been hit by the fever. So Drew, Rhett, I know you guys got him just a little bit behind me in that RB2 area. I got him as a back end RB1, especially in redraft. But any take on what me or Jorge had to say there, or where you guys have him ranked?
I mean, I've got a giant tier at running back between running back 9 to running back 16, where Josh Jacobs lives at running back 14. But honestly, he's one of my least favorite picks in that tier. I can't shake the, only 4% of his carries went for 10 plus yards, and almost 20% of his carries went for a loss or no gain at all. He didn't look like the same player. Maybe it was the offense, but then Zamir White stepped in, and, greater defenses aren't going to pay as much attention to Zamir White as they are to Josh Jacobs. But nevertheless, we saw some more success from Zamir White there. And so I'm worried that Josh Jacobs might not be the player that he was a couple of years ago. And then you got Matt LaFleur coming out saying that they plan on having a platoon with 2 to 3 running backs. They did invest decent draft capital into Marshawn Lloyd. I'm not concerned about thighs of steel at all, but Marshawn Lloyd does make me a little bit nervous. But A.J. Dillon, I'm not too worried about. But he's not a guy, running back 11 ADP. He's a guy that I'm not going to have a ton of. Maybe if he does start the year slow, maybe I do try to trade for him, but he's probably not going to be a guy I draft very often at all at that price.
And just a note on Zamir White. Average defenders in the box, RB25. Josh Jacobs was RB1 last year in average defenders in the box. So there was a little bit of difference in how the defense approached attacking the Las Vegas Raiders when Zamir White was on the field. But yet, like you said, was more efficient. Let's pivot to Ramondre Stevenson, everyone's favorite forgotten running back. I got him at RB22. Jorge's got him at 20. Drew's got him all the way back to RB28 and RB3. But our boy Rhett, the Louisiana legend himself, has got him as an RB1, ranked at RB11. Rhett, I gotta know why you got him so high, man.
You're muted.
Oh, you're on mute. Perfect. That's the perfect.
It wasn't meant to be. But look, to clarify, I want to blame our boss first off, because I'm looking at the Fantasy Pros ECR that I updated 2 days ago right now, and I actually have him at RB16. Yet the algorithm says that that I have him at RB11. So whatever our boss is doing to make me look bad, I don't know what's going on there. But to make
funny how nobody else has issues with their rankings. It's just
just
listen. I'll show you the screenshot after the show, baby. It's fine. But to clarify, I'm still higher on Ramondre Stevenson than anybody else in this room. And let's start with why. First off, new coaches bring new coaching schemes. Alex Van Pelt as the new offensive coordinator, bringing back a very similar system to where Ramondre had his best season in 2022, which revolved on a zone blocking scheme, inside-outside zone, where he averaged 5 yards per carry. Now, last season, they went back to a Bill Belichick, Old Faithful, the gap scheme, and Ramondre Stevenson's yard per carry dropped by a full yard on top of missing 5 games in that season. So he ended up being in a timeshare with 3.5 yards per carry, Ezekiel Elliott, supposed league winner, Ezekiel Elliott. Yet during that time, when they were playing together at the same time, Ramondre Stevenson was out carrying Ezekiel Elliott 10.8 carries per game, had a higher success rate around 50% on his carries versus Zeke, which was around 45%. They roughly caught the same amount of passes. Again, slight advantage to Ramondre at 3.2 receptions per game versus 3. So had he been healthy for a full season, which we can't take health into account, we can be honest about that, Ramondre Stevenson throughout the season was still a better player than Ezekiel Elliott, despite what the raw numbers tell you by the end of the season, and ended up still catching 38 passes. 2 years ago, keep in mind his best season, he caught around 70 passes as well. So the innings eater Zeke Elliott situation that we had is not going to be there this year. We're back to the zone blocking scheme, which means Ramondre Stevenson should thrive and have more of a bounce back year than he had in 2023. And yes, they signed one of Drew's favorites.
Yeah, they did.
Former Washington Commander, Antonio Gibson, stud athlete. I get all of it. But if we're really looking at what it's going to be, can we really expect it to be anything other than Antonio Gibson being that third down guy and getting the primary pass catching work? And even so,
that's the role I want in that offense.
But listen, are we just going to assume that Ramondre Stevenson is going to get 0 pass catching work with a rookie quarterback this year?
No, not 0.
Okay, so there is a very strong chance that we see a bounce back more to that 45 to 50 reception place for Ramondre Stevenson. And so, yes, to have him as the alleged RB11 is probably a bit flawed, and I'm going to blame Jorge's once again God-given algorithm. But that
hit publish next time, idiot. What do you want me to say?
But
you gotta hit the buttons.
At RB16 or even at RB11, Ramondre Stevenson's current ADP in June is at running back 24. And if I'm expecting him to end up at running back 16 or so, somewhere in that mid-tier RB2, and he's going as a late RB2 to early RB3, I'm buying that guy over the course of a season.
Yeah, his best ball ADP is running back 19, and maybe it's my love it for Antonio Gibson. I don't know, but I'm all the way out at that price. I mean, he was running back 29 in points per game last year. So you take out the fact that he missed games to injuries, things like that. Points per game, he was running back 29. And I just don't think Drake May is enough to get him from running back 29 to a back in RB1, high end RB2. There, I don't see it. Antonio Gibson is better than Ezekiel Elliott. present day.
Rookie running back plus change scheme that's better for him. That doesn't push him over the top.
How do we know the scheme is better?
Because we saw it in 2022 where he was in a zone scheme and averaged 5 freaking yards a carry and caught 70 balls.
We have no idea what this scheme is going to look like. This is a new scheme we haven't seen on the field. How do we just know what's better?
Well, I did read an article where the Patriots offensive tackle talked about how it's going to be more outside zone.
I would hope that the players on the offense are optimistic that it'll be better, but I'm not going to believe it just because they're saying it's so. And I like Drake May, but I just like Stevenson was almost running back 30 in points per game last year. And so I can't see a world where this offense gets enough of an improvement for him to even be an RB2. That's why I've got him at 28. He's a flex play for me at best.
Yeah. Receiver room, I don't care what they did in the draft, still garbage too. So, I mean, there's a very good chance that Ramondre Stevenson might still be the best player in that offense this season. So there's that as well.
Maybe.
Here as Q, our running back 11, man. It's a good argument. I understand it, but I don't know, man. I'm burnt on Ramondre Stevenson. All right, let's get to the wide receiver position. Marvin Harrison Jr. Drew is the only person to rank him as a wide receiver 1. Jorge, Rhett, and myself pretty much have him ranked across the board in the same position. I believe me and Jorge got him at 16, and Rhett got him at 15, or vice versa, some kind of mix of something like that. Drew, is it the fact that he is the guy in that offense where you're comfortable putting him as wide receiver 1 for you? Is that the overall thought process?
That's part of it for sure. I mean, he's been described multiple times now as a generational prospect. And whether you agree with that statement or not, he got the draft capital to match it, and you really couldn't have asked for a much better landing spot in terms of, he landed with I already talked about how much I like Kyler this year. I think he is an underrated NFL quarterback, and I think he's also an underrated fantasy quarterback for this season. And tight end Trey McBride is really the only competition he has for targets. And so I don't think that that's going to keep him from getting the targets that he would need to demand to be a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. And so short of injury, I really don't see Marvin Harrison Jr. having too many blocks away from being a wide receiver 1. I mean, now obviously most of us didn't know just how quite special Puka was, how good he was going to be as a rookie. But whenever you look at special prospects that come along, being a wide receiver 1 in your rookie season isn't something that's new. Like Puka was the wide receiver 9 in points per game last year. In 2021, Jamar Chase was the wide receiver 5. In 2020, Justin Jefferson was the wide receiver 10. And so I don't think it's that much of a stretch to have Marvin Harrison Jr., who is looked at in the same light as Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson as prospects, to also be a wide receiver 1 whenever you only have one real guy that's a competition for targets in Trey McBride. And so, once you get, whenever you look at the receiver position, I've got him at the back of a tier in my tier 3 with AJ Brown, Puka, Drake London, Marvin Harrison Jr. After that, you've got older guys like Mike Evans and Devontae Adams, and you have some younger guys in more crowded rooms like Brandon Ayuk and DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, Nico Collins, and then Chris Olave with much more questionable quarterback play. So it's just guys that I have in the same area as Marvin Harrison Jr. It's tough for me to rationalize why I would prefer those receivers to Marvin Harrison Jr. personally. So, for me, he's a wide receiver 1 right off the rip.
Yeah, and I agree with you for the most part, except for this. With Marvin Harrison Jr. out the jump, we're banking on a mega season. And yes, you are 100% right in that in 4 of the top 11 yardage seasons of all time for rookies have come in each of the past 4 seasons. I agree with you completely. You didn't throw Garrett Wilson in there, but he's part of that at number 11.
Mm-hmm.
Now, 3 of those guys, the top 10 receivers that you were talking about, were all buoyed by 6+ touchdown receptions. We can all agree in this room that we don't want to project touchdowns because touchdowns are an impossible metric to fully predict on a weekly basis. Yeah. Yes. So Garrett Wilson in 2022, one of the 11 best single season rookie yardage seasons of all time. was wide receiver 19 and half PPR, 174.2 points per game. That was with 143 targets, 83 receptions, 1,143 yards. So we're banking on Marvin Harrison having a mega season, but in order to get to that mega season threshold, you need to have a mega production season in touchdowns, and that's not something I'm willing to do just yet and just throw it out there willy-nilly.
Yeah, with Trey McBride there, I don't know what his over-under is in terms of like if you could go to a betting site and bet his over-under on touchdowns. If it's set at 6, I'd take the over. Like you said, it's tough to project, but with the other pieces in that offense, if 6 is the touchdown threshold with how good of a red zone threat he was at Ohio State and how many touchdowns that I think that Kyler Murray will throw, I would be comfortable saying that he will score at least 6 touchdowns this rookie season. I'd make that bet pretty comfortably.
Like I have him at 15, which says he's right on the line as to whether he can be a wide receiver 1, which means it's a couple touchdowns here or a couple touchdowns there that make that difference. So what we're talking about at this point is us not really seeing him that differently. Just those rankings make it look a little bit different. But ultimately, if he hits that 6, 7, 8 touchdown threshold like you're talking about, I'm 100% in on what you just said. But I'm not going to go ahead and try to predict and project that because it's impossible to do.
Jorge, any take on MHJ?
You guys pretty much hit the nail on the head here. Like, none of us are that far out of having him as a wide receiver 1. I don't. You have Michael Wilson there, Trey McBride. You do have, James Conner is healthy. Greg Dortch. Well, yeah, the Dortch is there. Yeah. But I would not be surprised for a PPR. I would not be surprised for a non-PPR and a PPR for him to immediately excel as a wide receiver 1 in those formats. I guess my only concern is the target volume for him to make him a viable wide receiver 1 in a full PPR, given the fact that there are other receiving options. There is Trey McBride that he has a chemistry with, that they do have with the draft Trey Benson, as well as they have James Conner in that backfield, taking some of the pressure off of Kyler. Not to mention Kyler being able to make plays on his own. So do they need to hyper target Marvin Harrison? I don't know that they need to do that. If this was like a really shitty team, then absolutely, I would say this is absolutely going to be a target hog and he's going to be a wide receiver 1. But if anything, I think it's more of a yardage play for him in the other formats.
Let's not forget that Garrett Wilson did do that with a cast of Zach Wilson,
terrible
Mike White,
play.
Chris Strevler, CFL legend, a band of quarterbacks at the position, and he was still able to put up a great rookie season. So I'm looking forward to Garrett Wilson this year. I'm looking forward to Marvin Harrison Jr. this year as well. So we are up against the clock. A lot of great content here. Let's roll. You guys want to talk one more wide receiver before we pivot to tight ends?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's go Deontay Johnson, because I think the thought process and the we've done mock drafts and we've talked about this player and how undervalued he is and how much we're getting him at a discount and all these drafts and the amount of targets that he's going to see. Carolina came out today with a tweet saying pretty much Deontay Johnson's primarily going to be the X wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers, a role that was dominated by DJ Shark last year. So a guy that doesn't get any separation to a guy that is one of the best in getting separation. But then when you guys gave me your rankings, what we were talking about in all these drafts and everything else is you're still ranking them where everyone's drafting them. Drew's got him at wide receiver 30, Jorge 38. I got him at 21. The only guy that's got him as a back end wide receiver 2, and Rhett at wide receiver 34 for a player that we are projecting to get 130, 140 targets in this offense. Is it the lack of quality of play from the quarterback that has Deontay Johnson so low for you? Or is it the play of yesteryears of Deontay Johnson that has kind of got you hesitant to move him up? We'll start with you, Jorge.
Yeah, so I look at who I have ranked in front of him as I'm like going through my list here, and so I have to ask myself in a PPR, would I rather have Deontay Johnson, or Terry McLaurin? Do I trust Terry McLaurin to do more with his targets than I do Deontay Johnson? Thus, giving me the added fantasy bonus there, not just having the reception floor. I'd rather have McLaurin. I have Christian Kirk, Zay Flowers, C. Higgins, Jaden Reed, Jordan Addison, Jamison Williams, that I'm really big on this year. And then I have Deontay. For me, it became a situation as I'm ranking my wide receivers, he just kept on falling further and further down. I get it. He's going to be a target volume monster. He's going to get the PPR receptions. My only concern is, and it was kind of a concern that we were seeing in Pittsburgh, is does he get the touchdowns? Is he going to get the touchdowns? Where is that? Is he going to be a chain mover, or is he going to be an end zone touchdown scorer? And if he's just going to have that reception floor, then I think the wide receivers that I just rattled off give you more of an upside than just having the PPR reception floor that he has right now.
That's fair. It's tough for me to rank a guy like Jaden Reed ahead of Deontay Johnson, just knowing his role in the offense and the lack of snaps that he had last year. He did do great things when he did get the ball, so I could see why you would be projecting maybe a little bit more of a role for him on that offense in Green Bay. But, I mean, Rhett loves Dontavian Wicks, and Dontavian Wicks could take some of what Jaden Reed is going to do on the field. So there could be a situation where
I thought
you were going to
sorry, no, I was trying to let you. I'd be more concerned for Christian Watson, which I probably should readjust my rankings now, for Dontavian Wicks than I would be for Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks.
All right, that's fair. So for me, like I'm seeing a great season incoming for Deontay Johnson. So I am not afraid to rank him above consensus at all. I mean, I almost want to rank him where you guys rank him so I could keep getting him at a discount.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
We're helping deflate his value. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Rhett, Drew, Rhett, you also had Deontay at 34, just 4 spots ahead of Jorge. Is your thought process like Jorge? Is it pretty much in the same pathway?
What I'm going to say is this. I do believe in Dave Canales. I do believe in Bryce Young having a rebound year this season. At the end of the day, it's just going to come down to this very simply. And we're projecting an automatic upgrade for Bryce Young after a year where he was absolutely just atrocious to the point where you can get him at an obscene discount that I've been buying this offseason. Now, I've been saying this all along that I've looked at the Deontay Johnson thing, and I think he's in for a monster season. But this being a first draft, the thing that kind of happens right now is this. I'm kind of going, do I take him above this guy? Do I take him above this guy? Do I take him above this guy? And ultimately, they kind of fall where they are, and that's going to get fine-tuned as we get further into the offseason, and we kind of get to know more, and we get into training camp, and we see draft data and things like that. So for now, it's a conservative 34, but I'm with you where I think there's at least 130 targets coming this season. You know, it's just a question of what will that target quality look like? What will that ADOT look like? Different things like that. Because a couple of years ago, Deontay Johnson had a monster reception season, but it didn't show up in fantasy points because he had 0 touchdowns as well. So it's just one of those things. Once again, it's hard to project exactly where this guy is going to fall, even though we do expect a very healthy target share.
That's Deontay Johnson. We're going to pivot over to the tight end position, and everyone's favorite tight end at the moment, Mr. Highlight Reel of the summer, Kyle Pitts. I got him at 7. Jorge's got him at 5. Drew's got him at 5, and Rhett's also got him at 7.
Wait, I'm not the highest on Pitts.
No.
Oh, I got to move him up.
Unless they were upgraded, I might have missed it.
Yeah, so on the site we have 6 for Drew and I, and then 7 and 7 for you and Rhett.
Okay, I got to move him up.
You guys got him outside the top 5 as well.
No, wait.
Is the algorithm? Yes.
No, yeah,
Yes.
Rhett, you
Thank
might be
you.
onto something. I've got Pitts at tight end 4.
You got Evan Ingram above Kyle Pitts on the website there, Drew. So maybe there is something.
There is
to
something
this
wrong with it. 'Cause
algorithm.
I've got Evan Ingram as tight end 8 and Pitts as tight end 4. So Rhett might actually have a case here. There might be something to what he's talking
I
about.
told you.
So is having him as a top 5 tight end, considering the season that he just had, and we've talked about this ad nauseum. We talked about the lack of quality targets, and then the upgrade that he's getting in quarterback. But you guys got Kirk Cousins so low, but got his pass catchers, his running backs, tight end, his top wide receiver, and his running backs so high.
Mm-hmm.
So are you expecting Kyle Pitts to be the second overall target in Atlanta? And is that the reason why you justify having him as a top 5 overall tight end?
Yeah, I'm not even sure it's not a 1A, 1B conversation. Like, I don't even know if he's the number 2. It might be even closer than that. But that is a lot of what goes into it. And that's kind of whenever we talked about Kirk Cousins, yeah, I said I might be a little too low on him because of how much I do like his pass catchers. But yeah, I mean, Kyle Pitts, man, he's just the only season of his career that he had any type of resemblance of real NFL quarterback play was the year before Matt Ryan, before Father Time hit Matt Ryan and whenever he went to Indy. But he had, arguably the second best rookie tight end season in NFL history whenever he had just decent quarterback play. And Kirk Cousins, you talk about what he can do for tight ends. I mean, we just saw it most recently with TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota. We've seen it with Jordan Reed in Washington in the past. Like, he is not afraid to target the tight end. And I just believe in the talent that Kyle Pitts is. And I do fully believe that the thing that has been holding him back has been the combination of Desmond Ridder and Marcus Mariota and Taylor Heineke being the guys that he's catching the ball from over the last 2 years. I think that's I think that really is a lot of what goes into it, and I know that the Kyle Pitts fatigue is real and it feels like he's been in the league forever, but it's easy to lose sight of the fact that he was drafted, he's younger or the same age as these guys that we love, like Trey McBride. He's the same age as Sam Laporta. He's younger than Trey McBride. He's younger than Dalton Kincaid. Like, I know he's been in the league for a few years at this point now, but this guy is he's still coming into his own, and he's finally going to get actual quarterback play this year. And so, I've got him at tight end 4. I mean, I've got one giant tier at the top of my tight end rankings with 5 tight ends. There's tight end 1 through 5. I think that there is a really solid argument for any of them to finish as the tight end 1. So basically, I just don't want to be the first. I want to get one of my top 5 tight ends. I just don't want to be the first guy to draft a tight end. Like, I don't want to be the one taking Sam Laporta in the second round. And so that kind of leads me to drafting a lot of Kyle Pitts and a lot of Mark Andrews and these guys that are going as the tight end 4 or 5 later on. I would just rather have those guys than spending up at tight end whenever I think that there's a good group of guys that could finish, that has the upside to finish as the tight end 1.
And that is enough Atlanta Falcons talk. We've hit our quota for the year. No more Atlanta Falcons talk.
We're done.
You're going to have to kick me off the show.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to have to give you your own minute where me and Rhett just go off the screen and you can talk the Atlanta Falcons. We'll even bring in Keith for you.
Oh, there he
Falcons,
is.
There we go.
Atlanta Falcons.
It all comes back.
We'll give you 15 seconds of Atlanta Falcons talk. Kyle Pitts is a very intriguing prospect. We're all expecting a increase in usage this year with Kirk Cousins, another polarizing tight end that maybe had a down year last year. Of course, he had that devastating injury. Mark Andrews coming in again. We know what his production profile is in the Todd Monken system on Baltimore. When he's healthy, he's consistently either the 1 or 2 target on that team. I know we have a guy in this room that is high on Rashad Bateman, so he probably projects Rashad Bateman to be the second overall target on the offense. No. But I can't buy it. For me, it's Zay Flowers, Mark Andrew, and then on the next week it can be Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers at that point, right? So I got him at tight end 3. Jorge's got him at 8, Drew at 7, and Rhett at 6. Oh no!
I got him at 5.
Yeah.
The algorithm.
The algorithm. So where do you guys have him ranked outside of the algorithm? Because I have him at 3.
I've got him at tight end 5. I mentioned I have 5 tight ends that are in my like gigantic
And
tier 1.
he's in that tier for you, of course, right?
He's tight end 5. It's right there. I've got Kelsey, Laporta, McBride, Pitts, Andrews, 1 through 5, all of the same tier together. So he's in my tier 1 still. He is at the bottom of it, not because of Rashad Bateman, but I know I still Mark Andrews was the toughest one to keep pushing down, but it was tough to move off Kelsey with him being tight end 1. I still believe that whenever he is healthy and is engaged, I think he's the best tight end this league has to offer, and he's paired up with the best quarterback the league has to offer and the best the best offensive mind the league has to offer. And so I just, Kelsey's one of those guys to where until I see that he's not still Travis Kelsey, I'm just going to continue to rank him there. But Andrews is definitely in that group to where I think that he has just as much upside as anybody else to finish as the overall tight end 1. And I agree with you that I do think it is clear Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers as the top 2 passing options in that offense as well.
Yeah,
as much as I love Rashad Bateman.
Top 2 passing options. And once again, hashtag fix the algorithm, because I had on my ECR as Andrews is tight end 4. So you know what, Jorge? We're not. You know what?
You get Derek Brown on the phone. You say, D-Bro, your website Fantasy Pros is messing up. Fix the damn algorithm.
Listen,
we're trying to talk about stuff.
We have a Louisiana connection, so if I approach him sweetly and nicely, and perhaps maybe just talk about his time at the high school that I didn't live very far from growing up and knowing where he comes from, maybe he and I can work something out and we can all look better at the end of the day. I'd do it for you guys. I would.
You're a sweetheart.
I am. Thank you. Thank you for noticing.
And then if you're looking at last year, points per game basis, I mean, between tight end 1 and tight end 5, it's an average of like 1 point. So the difference isn't there that much on a per game basis. Overall, I mean, if you're looking at overall fantasy points, it's 40 fantasy points throughout the whole season. So, I mean, we're splitting hairs here between these tight ends. Mark Andrews could definitely find himself in a position, like Drew said, to finish as the overall tight end 1, just like the guys ahead of him. Trey McBride, Kyle Pitts, Travis Kelsey, of course, Sam Laporta. So any other things?
So
yeah, go ahead.
So is there any concern at all about just how well Isaiah Likely played with Lamar Jackson and Baltimore?
I would be lying if I said I didn't factor that into why I put him at tight end 5, was because like with how good Isaiah Likely looked down the stretch, can the Ravens just keep him off the field completely once Andrews is healthy? Like Andrews is the better player, but can you really just completely revert Isaiah Likely back to a bench role and not give him snaps after how well he played?
No.
So yeah, I think that's a fair point.
But I will say this. Baltimore seems like one of these prime candidates to run a lot of 12 personnel this year with the running backs they've signed with Derrick Henry, Isaiah Likely, and Mark Andrews can coexist, because down the stretch last year when Isaiah Likely was having the stretch that he was being used a heck of a lot more down the field, and Mark Andrews has always kind of been a safe, kind of dumbed down, find the soft spot sort of guy. So those two can coexist and possibly both thrive within that offense. So, yeah, it's an interesting setup for sure.
Yeah, but how good was Likely really? If you're looking at what he did throughout the process of the season where Mark Andrews was out, I mean, you're looking at the stretch of games. It's 1 target, 4 targets. He had a game of 7 targets, 6 targets, and then back down 4, 3, 2, 3. If he's not getting the touchdowns, he's pretty much irrelevant through that span between weeks 12 and 17 at that point. So he's going to be propped up by the touchdown usage for Isaiah Likely. And I think we kind of did that the year before as well, did we not? Where Isaiah Likely came on a little bit near the end of the season, and we were like, okay, we got to fade Mark Andrews a little bit because Isaiah Likely is a guy and will be a guy in this offense, and then just ended up being a nobody while Mark Andrews was healthy. So as much as I like Isaiah Likely, the player, I just don't think he sees a significant role with a healthy Mark Andrews. Enough of a role in order for me to drop him down in my rankings.
Yeah. Same thing you just said. I'm looking at the game logs now. Final 5 games. All 5 of those touchdowns came in 4 of those 5 games. And 2 of those games was 2 receptions, 1 touchdown, and 1 of them was 2 receptions, 2 touchdowns. So, yeah, it's an interesting case for sure.
All right. That's the show. We appreciate everyone who dropped in, dropped a comment, liked the stream, or subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already, head over to wherever you stream your podcast, rate and review the Fourth and Frame show and all the shows across Fantasy and Frames. We appreciate all of your support. And as always, Jorge, we appreciate your time coming on the show. One of the hardest working men at Fantasy and Frames. You did Dynasty 365 before us. Now you're on with us. Are you heading over to Shoot the Gap right after this with JT?
So JT has SC Romero from Fantasy Football Unlimited now in a few minutes.
Nice.
I will not be on Shoot the Gap, but those 2 guys are going to crush it talking about the best IDP rookie landing spots. So stay tuned on the Fantasy and Frames channel wherever you're watching us in a few. You did bring it up earlier. Still on the fence as far as tonight, whether we're doing the Scott Fishbowl thing, but at the latest, it would be Friday night for those who are interested in doing a little random late night Scott Fishbowl mock draft show.
All right. As always, Jorge, the frame is yours. Let the people know where they can find you. Let them know what you got going on inside of fantasy football and, of course, outside of fantasy football.
Yeah, so you can find me at Jorge B. Edwards on Twitter/X. You can also, I'd rather you all follow at Fantasy and Frames on Twitter/X and on Facebook and on TikTok and Instagram. And over at our YouTube channel, please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. Everybody here at Fantasy and Frames is just doing a lot of hard work, putting out all sorts of forms of content, whether it's shorts or videos or podcast episodes. Just, speaking of podcast episodes, rate, review, and subscribe. Let us know what you think, what you want to hear more of, less of, wherever you listen to the podcast. I want to give a shout out to these 3 who just recently put out a bunch of articles. They'll be posting on fantasyandframes.com. We're covering, rookie prospects. Now that we don't have landing spots, we're covering dynasty targets. Before you know, we're going to be talking about redraft targets. Chris, you put out a really good article today that it's the start of a series. Maybe you could tell the people a little bit about it before we get off the air, because I thought it was freaking fantastic.
Yeah, thanks. It was just a little take 3 with Chris B, where we recently had a redraft show here on Fourth of Frames. I think it was last week or a couple weeks ago. So I just wanted to share my takes and what I found from the trends and everything else through that redraft. You can go find it, like Jorge said, at fantasyandframes.com. So I appreciate you, Jorge, as always, coming on the show. Rhett, Drew, any final words before we head out of here?
Before we leave, I'd like to clear the record. Me and Drew were on a guest spot for another show you did earlier this week. And I would like to clear the record right now and just tell the world and tell everyone around us that I am not a Rico Dowdle stan. I, in fact, a Rico Dowdle realist. I would like to apologize to any Rico Dowdle stans out there if I gave you all a bad name. I am simply, once again, just a simple Louisiana boy trying to do Louisiana things on a daily basis. God bless you, alligators and boiled crawfish.
Terrific. Drew, you going to follow that up?
I don't know how I'm supposed to follow it up, man. No, actually, I do. Go draft Shalani Woods.
You heard it there. Tune in next week. We had our ranking discrepancy episode just this right now. We just talked about all that. Next week, we got Howard Bender, special guest, where we're going to be breaking down our wide receiver and tight end rankings. Make sure you tune in for that, 9 p.m. Eastern, June 12th, next Wednesday. For Jorge Edwards, at Jorge B. Edwards. For Drew at Drew3MR, for Rhett at R Manual Sports, I'm Chris Babs.